My name is Lee Strang, and I teach at the University of Toledo College of Law. And among the courses I teach are constitutional law and constitutional interpretation. And I primarily write in the area of constitutional law and constitutional interpretation as well, in particular focusing on originalism as a method of constitutional interpretation. I'm working on a modular casebook series, and that's a traditional constitutional law casebook that's subdivided into separate volumes that are paper-bound that cover the discrete subject matters within the overall course of constitutional law. Currently, we have 4 volumes that have been published. A 5th volume is scheduled to be published this fall, and then there are going to be subsequent volumes in the next year or two that we will be publishing. Volume 1 covers judicial power. Volume 2 covers legislative power. Volume 3 encompasses executive power. Volume 4 deals with federalism limitations on the states and the federal government, and then forthcoming Volume 5 covers the Reconstruction Amendments. The modular casebook series is different from other traditional casebooks in at least 4 ways. The first and most important way is its physical format. So unlike the traditional casebook, which tends to be a hardbound, 2,000-plus page tome that is infrequently revised, the modular casebook series has discrete volumes where each volume covers a particular subject matter, and each of the volumes is paper-bound. And this leads to a number of benefits both for teachers and for students. For teachers, it allows a teacher, depending on the number of credits that teacher has, and depending on the subject matter focus that that teacher wants to utilize the course for, to select among a growing list of volumes that suits that teacher's needs. From the student's perspective, instead of having to buy a 2,000-page plus $200 plus casebook, a student would have to buy only what that professor requires, which could be 1, 2, or even 3 volumes, up to a 6-credit course, saving the student a significant amount of money. And I think another benefit from the teacher and the student's perspective from the modular casebook series is that it allows more frequent revision of each of the volumes. And each revision of a particular volume doesn't necessarily have to affect any of the other volumes in the series, allowing for more frequent and therefore more up-to-date volumes in the series. The second major reason why the modular casebook series is different from other traditional casebooks is because it focuses on the standard arguments that are made in each of the subject matters that are covered in each volume. So for example, when it comes to the contracts clause, I edited the cases in that particular area, both earlier cases and current cases, to focus on the arguments that are most persuasive to the Supreme Court and others in that legal practice in that area of law. So the case editing is focused on in introducing students to the standard arguments in that area. And second, each of the casebooks throughout the casebook has a series of exercises which focus on presenting to and drawing out from students the different arguments that are being presented in a particular case or in other selected materials, so that the students are aware of those materials and those arguments and therefore themselves can learn and understand, and then in class have an engaged discussion based on what those arguments are. The third major difference between the modular casebook series and traditional casebooks is that it tries to break down the wall between doctrinal courses and research courses, and it does so through 2 main mechanisms. First, each of the volumes in the modular casebook series contains a CD-ROM that contains a fully searchable and readable selection of the major primary sources for the original Constitution from the framing and ratification in 1787 through 1789. And this allows professors throughout the course to refer students back to those primary materials as a way to introduce students to some of the main modes of argument throughout constitutional law, including text, structure, and history. And the second way that I do that in each volume is that the exercises after each case and after the materials focus as well, not just on what the Supreme Court has said before, judicial precedent, but also focuses on text, structure, and history, which these resources that are in the CD-ROM allow students access to in an inexpensive and timely manner. The fourth major difference between the modular casebook series and traditional casebooks is that the modular casebook series, I think, tries to be very fair in the standard modes of argumentation in constitutional law. Unlike the traditional casebook, which almost exclusively or sometimes exclusively focuses on judicial precedent as a means of interpreting the Constitution, and to a lesser degree, a scholarly commentary on the meaning of the Constitution, the modular casebook series makes a real effort to try to be fair to textual-based arguments, structure-based arguments, and history-based arguments. And it does so in 2 ways. One is in my casebook editing, where in editing the cases, I try to make sure that there's a fair representation of each of those different forms of argumentation in the edited case. And then, relatedly, In the exercises after each case, I try to draw out for the students what those arguments were, the validity of those arguments, and whether those arguments are persuasive arguments as a general matter. I'm currently working on teacher's manuals for each of the 4 volumes in the forthcoming Volume 5 for the Modular Casebook series. The teaching manual will offer suggestions based on my own teaching experience as to what works or doesn't work regarding a particular case, and will offer suggested answers for each of the questions in the exercises that follow each case in the Modular Casebook series and follow other materials in the Modular Casebook series. And then lastly, what I offer are general suggestions about how the Modular Casebook series is structured and the different perspective that that brings to the subject matter, and then suggest that as a possible way to emphasize the material to the students. The Modular Casebook series is different and innovative for 4 different reasons. First, and primarily because of its physical format, which divides constitutional law up by volume and subject by subject. Second, because it introduces students to the core constitutional law arguments from each subject matter. Third, because of the breakdown of the barriers between doctrine and research courses. And lastly, because it treats all the arguments in constitutional law fairly, including text, structure, and history. And I welcome questions or comments, and I'm happy to give more information to anybody who's interested in the Modular Casebook series.